This video is going to be all about how I make my screen print editions. Specifically, the brand new 7th edition of my best-selling print, Fail We May, Sell We Must. I'm going to take you inside the chocolate factory today, and we're going to go on the whole journey from blank piece of paper all the way up to beautiful hand-finished print with gold leaf. Because something I've noticed over the last 6 years or so of selling screen print editions is that people don't really know how they're made. And when I try and explain it to people, I can see their eyes kind of glaze over as I start talking about photosensitive emulsion and registration and layers of silk stencils. What I really want you to take away from this video is an understanding of just how physical this process is and how much care and attention and craftsmanship is required at each stage of the way to end up with the beautiful, high quality finished result that we do. Because what makes it any different really from a digital print? It's actually really difficult to tell if you're just looking at the images. But when you buy the print and it comes to your house in your lovely white tube and you take it out and you unroll it and you peel back that pink tissue paper for the first time, you're going to have this beautiful moment where you see the quality firsthand with your eyes. And you see how the ink sits on the paper differently and it reflects the light differently and does things that a digital print simply can't do. Because ultimately, this is not the cheap and easy way for me to reproduce my limited edition prints. I could just go and get these done digitally and it would be a lot easier and a lot simpler, but it'd be a lot less interesting. And the final finish wouldn't be as good. And that's what I care about most. I want you to have the best quality version of this artwork that is possible. This artwork is filled with references to Greek myth and folklore and different paintings from art history, but we're not going to look at that today. If you want a deep dive into like why the Minotaur is sitting with a little glass of wine, or why the seagull in the corner has an arrow through it, or even where does the phrase "fail we may, sell we must" originate from, then I made another video for a previous edition where I did a deep dive into all of the references and all of the things that are mentioned and all the narrative in the print. So you can go and check that out. I'll link it in the description. What we're going to focus on today is the physical making. We're going to journey now into the basement studio of my screen printer, Ali, at Manson's Press. Because the first thing to note about this process is that it's a collaborative one. I see my relationship with Ali a little like how a musician and a producer might work together. So I'm bringing him my pop song, if you like, and he's gonna like twizzle all the little knobs on the dials that I don't understand and make it sound as good as it possibly can for release. A new print always starts with the colors. In the 7 different versions of this edition that I've released, I've changed nothing about the structure of the design itself. The only thing that's changed are the 4 colors that make it up, the palette. And you might think that after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, now 7 different versions of this print, that I might be starting to get a bit bored or running out of ideas for colors, but actually not at all, because every single new version that we do teaches me and Ali something new about how these 4 colors can work together and what they can bring out in terms of a different tone from the design. Recently, I've been really inspired by the beautifully soft woodblock prints of Hiroshi Yoshida. Now, Yoshida built up these wonderful gradients of color over 40 or 50 layers of absolutely meticulous woodblock printing. I don't have that. I've only got 4 layers, not 40. So I'm not going to be able to achieve those same gradients that he gets, but I can borrow some of that color intelligence for my new version. And I wanted to bring this sort of dusky feel that he gets to his prints to this version. This is where that physicality in the process really begins, because now we're going to mix each of these 4 colors from their base elements, so that's pigment and binder. Basically, expensive paint brands put more pigment in their paint to make them richer and longer lasting. And because we're mixing from our base elements, we can do the same. We can make things very, very pigment rich. So that's what we do. We load it up. Ali loads it up and then he adds in the base and he starts to mix and mix and mix and mix and mix. And I stand there and watch while he mixes and mixes and mixes and mixes and says he's going to add a little bit more blue or whatever to try and achieve the rough colours that I gave him. Then eventually, once he's vaguely happy with what we've got, he'll print little squares of it onto a piece of paper like this. So prints little squares onto the same paper stock that we're going to use for the actual edition to see how they will look, because the colours often are very different in the pots compared to how they look on the paper. You've got to check it out. So what we do is then once we've printed all 4 of our colours together like this little mini abstract, then there begins this little dance of tweaks where we talk about adding a little bit more opacity to one colour or a little bit more white or just darkening one slightly to improve the balance. Because all the while we're really sort of guessing, because there's a big difference between this and this, isn't there? This is a funny little abstract painting. This is a fully realised design that's based on a sort of Renaissance atlas. They're very different animals. But this is our embryo. This is what I have to make the decision on, because getting a screen print edition of this size made is not a cheap endeavour for me as an artist. You know, I'm an independent artist, so I self-fund all of my editions and all of my exhibitions. So this is a big financial gamble for me to take ultimately. But I think it's a nice square. I was very comfortable with these. I really liked the way we had kind of 2 different shades of pink almost, this sort of peachy pink and this more mauvey, almost slightly purpley pink for the moon. And also this sort of greyish blue, which actually replaced what is usually the green in most other editions. I really like how that worked for the foliage. Your eye sort of sees it as green in the finished thing, but actually it's a blue. And then for the key line, which is usually a black, this time I went for a very dark teal, and that was something I picked up from Yoshida's work. You can see in his key lines he often doesn't use a black, he uses a very dark colour, and that's really what gives him that sort of dusk feel of the sun just going down. That's what I wanted to bring to this print. It's this gamble that to me makes it feel like I'm making an artwork rather than just getting a reproduction made, because making any artwork is a leap of faith. It's a hope that the idea that you have in your head will be able to be realised in reality and look better than you imagined. But often ideas aren't as good as you thought they were going to be. Sometimes they're far better. But as the print says, fail we may, sell we must. If I wanted to do this digitally, the unknowns would have ended right at the start, when I picked 4 colours on the screen, on Photoshop, sent to print, printer goes brrr, job done, end of video. But where's the fun in that? Where's the mystery? Where's the life? Instead, we're only just getting started on this print odyssey. Okay, so our palette of printing inks are mixed and we're now ready to get into the meat of the process, the actual printing. But first, we need to make the stencils, the silkscreen stencils themselves that we're going to push the inks through. Because we have 4 colours, we need 4 silkscreens, 1 for each colour. They're made by coating that silk mesh in a photosensitive emulsion, which is this green gloopy stuff. Once that screen has dried, we can position each of the acetates onto it under red light and then take it up to the exposure booth and then expose it to UV light for 10 minutes or so. And what happens there is the UV light is going to harden all of that photosensitive emulsion that it can hit, but everywhere where there's black on the acetate will block the light. So then once you've finished exposing it, you put it into the washout booth and you spray it with water, and everywhere that was blocked by the black on the acetate will wash away and leave us with a lovely stencil. Even at this stage of the process, you need to be very careful. Any residual bits of that emulsion still in the screen that haven't quite washed away will cause a blockage where the print inks will go very soon. So you need to be really careful, make sure it's all washed away. Ali takes plenty of time and care, washing, checking, washing. Then after that, he goes and puts it under light and checks it for pinholes, any little pinholes, and he'll dab a little pinhole in, just to make sure there's no areas where the ink is going to get through the mesh that we don't want it to. That process was repeated for all 4 of our screens, and then we're ready to roll. Now, after already many hours of labour and care, we're actually ready to start printing, finally. First colour up is going to be this lovely peachy pink. What happens here is we get the silk screen, Ali gets the silk screen, he puts it into his bed. So then he locks it into position to line it up and register it, making sure it's all twizzled and positioned perfectly. So each layer will line up on top of the next. And then he turns on his suction bed. So it sucks that piece of paper onto the bed, keeps it in position when the squeegee goes across. And then he gets his big squeegee and he puts that onto the arm and he locks that into the arm as well. Okay, and then what's actually gonna happen is he's gonna squeeze the arm back and forth to give him a nice even distribution of weight and pressure across the piece of paper to make sure that whole bit of paper is printed perfectly with that first layer of ink. So now he pours out that bit of peachy pink. And this bit always reminds me, and this is why I'm calling it Going Inside the Chocolate Factory, it always reminds me of the opening sequence of Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, where you've got like the dripping layers of melted chocolate, which is a very deep core memory for me. So that ink is poured out and then he floods it across the screen in preparation, places down and goes and squeezes across. Lifts up, and there you go, we've got our first colour printed here. And this is what it looks like at this stage. So we can't really see much of what's going on at all in the final version. We've just got the sun, the kind of silhouette of the sun basically, the pumpkin down here, you've got some tone on the Minotaur and tone on the mermaid. And the border is obviously the main bit of structure, and most of the phoenix up there in the corner is already in on this peach. Ali now repeats that 150 times. He goes into this beautiful sort of rhythmic dance where he's like stepping from one side to pick up a new piece of paper, swinging it into the bed goes down, swim across, lift up, into the drying rack, new piece of paper, swing in. Watching him do this is very rhythmic and smooth, absolute economy of motion, because he's doing this process so many times and he has to repeat the exact physical action, because any break or any change in rhythm could mean an unevenness in the print, or he might misregister, or any other kind of number of errors could occur if he loses his space and his rhythm. Thankfully, I only watch him do 50 of 150. He's printing that over a couple of days, and I'm turning up with my camera. If you haven't figured it out by now, I'm the one filming this process. So I'm awkwardly squeezed in next to the bed filming him. And then into the drying rack they all go, stacking up 50 at a time until you've got a full drying rack of prints. And now we're underway, we're off and running. That's colour one, done. Once he's finished printing all 150 of that first colour, and actually more than 150, because he'll always print extras, because obviously this process is by hand and it's over many stages, there's always going to be some slight errors. There's always going to be some prints that are slightly misregistered, or they get a little mark on them, or they get a slight dent when they're getting put into the drying rack at some point. Human error is involved because it's made by hand. So he actually prints more like 170 or so. Once they're all dried and restacked and reset, and then we're ready to print colour number 2. Lovely sort of greeny greyish blue, okay? This is really all the foliage and the landmass as well on the map. Same process again. That stack of paper that just got that first layer in, switches in to the bed, locks down, squeegee across, lift up, out it comes, and onto the drying rack. Over and over and over and over again. Colour number 3, which is our second pink. This is our kind of mauvey pink, which goes down next. So once again, Ali gets the new screen, locks it into the bed, repositions it in the exact same position as the previous one, so everything lines up perfectly on top. Puts the squeegee back in, pours out that ink once more, and we're ready to roll. Bed, print across, lift up, onto the shoulder, then back onto the rack, and then pulls another print across, same again. Over and over and over and over again. Perfectly in tune with his kind of equipment and his rhythm. It's actually really enjoyable to watch him do this. It's a very like rhythmic thing to see a craftsperson in flow. Something that I've always enjoyed watching, and actually why I'm making this video as well is because I always enjoy watching videos of skilled craftsmen doing their thing. It's just interesting to me. It's what got me into sign painting in the first place. I was watching videos of people doing it and thinking, that looks really nice. And so I've always tried to bring that aspect to my work. And that's why I'm making this video as well. And you can see, even though at this stage, we're not really seeing the design in any complete form, he still has to be very vigilant and make sure each part is printing properly, because you get right to the end and realize something hasn't printed through when you print the last layer. There's no way of going back. You can't go back and correct 150 screen prints. There's no Control-Alt-Delete. Is that right on the computer? No, Control-Z, Command-Z. I don't do too much Photoshop. To just reset things and start again, you can't just do that. This is physical, this is reality, this is on the edge, basically. This is what making art is all about for me. And why I love what we get in the end is actually a very living, breathing thing. So now finally we arrive at screen number 4, which is the exciting part, because this is really where the whole thing comes together. Up until now we've been adding layers of color and tone, but screen number 4, this lovely dark teal color you can see here, this is where the whole thing comes together and the design comes alive. It has all of the information really in the design. It's got all of the type, it's got the phrase itself, fail we may, sail we must. It's got all the lines of longitude and latitude on the atlas. It outlines the borders and it has all of the kind of detail in the faces of the mermaid and the minotaur and the sun and the moon. So this is really the key moment. But that doesn't mean anything really changes about the process. It's still the same as the 3 screens that came before it. The 4th and final screen gets locked into the printing bed in the exact same way as before. That lovely teal is poured out across the screen. Screen goes down, flood across, paper in, swish, lift, and there's the beautiful finished product. And this is always a really exciting moment for both me and Ali, because so much work and effort, especially effort on his part, has gone into the whole process at this point. And this is where the design comes alive. And so you pull that squeegee across and you don't really know how it's going to look and feel until you lift that print bed and look at it for the first time. So as you can see, we've made the journey from this all the way to this, which has been our print odyssey. And I hope you've really understood a little bit about what goes into that and how we achieve this kind of consistent high quality. It's always remarkable to me. You can look across the whole edition, and when I get the whole edition back, I like check through every single one before I sign and number each print. And the consistency is insane. Like, it's, considering it's a hand process and you've literally watched like how much physicality goes into each sweep of the squeegee and the whole way around the process, that we end up with such a consistently beautiful, high quality result. And so now for 100 of these prints, this is where the story ends. Lovely 4-color design, ready to go and hang on a wall and make a space just feel more alive and more beautiful every day. But if we want to take things a little bit further, we can, because the next stage is to add some gold. Okay, so one more layer, the gold layer. And what starts with here is not really a color, but it's gold sized, which is actually a varnish, which has got a little bit of yellow to just tint it in, okay? So Ali mixes that up, and this is an oil-based product, right? Everything else has been water-based at this point. We're now using an oil-based varnish for the maximum longevity of our super high quality 23.5 karat gold leaf, because it's a very expensive material and you've got to respect it and you've got to do the best possible thing for it, which is to give it oil-based gold side. Gloopy, thick stuff compared to the inks, okay? Pour this one out. Again, now the select 50 come into the bed and they get this swept across in the exact same way as the colors as before, but it's just gonna go on the border here. It's just to sit on top of that border around where the peach is. They go into the drying rack. We leave them for a little bit, go and have a cup of tea. And then we come back and begin the gilding process. Now, this is the bit where I can actually be involved and actually help Ali out rather than just stand there watching with my camera while he does all the work. We do this in tandem together, okay? So now we're gonna spend the next 2 days stood there, gilding each one of these prints by hand, running little bits of gold leaf around the border, pressing it into that gold size, okay, until the whole area of the border is covered. And this process is just very meticulous and very slow and has to be very careful because gold's an incredibly expensive material. It's just been getting more and more and more expensive, as the world goes more chaotic. Basically, as Trump goes crazier in Iran and wherever else, the gold price keeps rising. 10 years ago when I first started using gold leaf, it cost about 30 quid a book. Now it costs over 60 quid a book. So the price has literally doubled. It's the exact same material. It's just linked to the cost of the global commodity. But doesn't mean we're not going to use it, because the effect is stunning. Not only is gold just shiny and beautiful, it's also used for its longevity. Gold is chemically inactive, so it's permanent in a sense that most things aren't. Almost everything fades, gold doesn't fade. And there really is no other way to do this bit other than by hand. You know, screen printing in some ways can be replaced by digital printing, but as we've learned, it's a bit boring and doesn't really have the same effect. But there is no real way of replicating actual gold leaf. Gold foil, it's not the same. Gold leaf will bounce the light in a beautiful way that is totally unique to it as a material. And so what we've got to do is we get different books and we cut these books of gold in half with a razor blade, just to make them a little bit more manageable. And then we're just going to run those bits of tissue paper around each area of the border over and over again, and making sure we're checking that there's no little holidays, little gaps at all. And so that just then takes the two of us stood side by side, gilding away, often just chatting about life as well, which I've kept out of the recording. Stood there working and gilding 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 and gilding. It's very repetitive, but it's also quite meditative, at least for the first hour or so. And then after about like hour 4 or 5, you start to just feel quite tired. Your back starts to hurt, arm starts to hurt, you're pressing constantly, and you're keeping a level of concentration and awareness that you're making sure you're doing a good result on each one. So you're just kind of fatiguing from doing that as well. But eventually you get through the whole stack, and then what we finish up with is just something very beautiful. So there we have it. This is the completed 7th edition of Fail We May, Sail We Must. There are 100 signed and numbered prints in the regular 4-colour edition, and there are 50 signed and numbered prints in the fancy gold leaf finished version. And I really hope that watching this video has helped you understand the level of craftsmanship that goes into these prints, the level of care, the level of physicality and effort and love that goes into making these prints, because they're an investment. This isn't a cheap throwaway piece of art that you get in an IKEA frame and stick on the wall just to make it look less like a squat in your house. This is a proper piece of art that you are investing in for your future, and hopefully even for your children's future, or whoever you want to give your artwork on to once you're not around anymore, because these are made with quality materials. As we've seen, those inks are super pigment rich and heavy. They will last, and they will still look good decades from now. So the whole idea is you invest in something that will really enrich your space and your life, and you get it framed properly, and you have it on the wall, and it makes every day, it just adds a bit more life into your world. If you're thinking about buying one of these prints, you can buy them direct from my website. I'll leave the links in the description to both editions. If you already own one of these prints, and there are hundreds of them already out there, then I hope this has really deepened your appreciation for what you already have on the wall. And if you're just someone who's interested in the screen printing process, maybe you're an artist who's looking to maybe get some prints done themselves, hopefully this has also been helpful as well. Sorry it's quite long, but I guess that's YouTube. People just go on a bit because they can. This isn't Instagram. But that was the whole point. I really wanted to show you the full thing and take my time and really explain it and talk about why I love doing it like this so much, which you just can't do in a reel. Also, you can't really show the quality of these prints in phone videos and phone cameras. It just doesn't convey. So I had to use my proper camera and really take the time and be there at every stage with Ali when he was going through the whole process, kind of getting in his way, to hopefully bring this whole video together. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you can enjoy one of these Fail We May, Sail We Must prints on your own wall very soon.